The next step in the 10-step system is exposure. In terms of exposure, our goal is to have a photograph in which there is absolutely no amount of detail that is being lost due to overexposure or underexposure, which means that there shouldn't be any areas that are so dark that there is no detail in them, nor should there be any areas that are so bright that there isn't any detail in them. Now, if you take a look at this photograph, you can see that it is a little bit bright over here on the ground. And as you can see that there is absolutely no detail here. There you can't see the texture of the floor, you can't see any detail. All that's there is white pixels. Now you can tell that by taking a look at the photograph, or you can also tell that by looking at the histogram. Now what exactly does the histogram tell us? The histogram is basically a graph of all the pixels that are there in your photograph. Now, if your histogram is spiked up on the left side, that means that there are a lot of dark pixels. So basically the left side is the dark side and the right side is the bright side. So if your histogram is spiked up on the left, that means your photograph is going to have some dark pixels. And if it's spiked up on the right side, that means that there are quite a few bright pixels as well. Now in this case, my histogram is spiked up on both the sides, and that you can see that in the photograph as well. Some of the areas are a little bit too dark and some of the areas are a little bit too bright. Now, how do I know if those areas that are too bright, do they have any detail in them, or are they really overexposed and really bright so that there is no detail in them? You can tell that by taking a look at these two triangles over here. If these triangles are white, or basically if these triangles are any other color than black, that means that there is some part of your photograph that is getting either overexposed or underexposed. So if the right side triangle is white, that means that I have some areas of my photograph that are so overexposed there is no detail in them. If you want to see which areas those are, you can just go ahead and click on the triangle and it will highlight those areas for you. So as I clicked, you can see that all of these pixels that it has highlighted red, these are all overexposed, no detail in them. Now our job is to fix this. We need to bring back the detail. How can we do that? We have 5 sliders that allow us to do that. The first slider that you have is the exposure slider. Then you have highlights, shadows, whites and blacks. So with the help of these 5 sliders, I will try to bring the detail back in the areas that are either too bright or too dark. Now let's see what each one of these sliders does. When I move the exposure slider, I want you to observe what it does to the histogram. As I move the exposure slider to the left, do you see that the entire histogram is moving to the left? And obviously it is making the photograph overall a little bit darker. It is affecting the entire photograph. And as I move the exposure slider to the right, it is moving the entire histogram to the right, and it is making the entire photograph brighter. Now, let me just go ahead and reset that. Now if I want to affect only some areas of the photograph and not the entire photograph, because if I move the exposure slider on the bright side, it is not only brightening up the shadows, but it's also brightening up the areas that were already too bright. We don't want that. What if you only want to bring out some detail in only the dark areas, or what if you want to bring out the detail in only the bright areas? For that we have these 4 sliders. If we want to affect only the bright areas, we have highlights and whites that allow us to do that. So if I want to darken it up, if I want to darken up the bright areas, I will take my highlight slider and move it towards the left. And now as I move this slider, I want you to observe what it does to the histogram. As I move the highlight slider, it is not affecting the entire histogram. It is affecting only this area, which was representing the bright areas of the picture. And if you've noticed, as I move the slider, this triangle has become black, which means that there is no longer any clipping happening. And I have detail in these areas. I cannot see all of that detail entirely right now, so I'm just gonna go ahead and take it down even further. And if I reach the limit of this and I still don't get to the point where I'm happy with my photograph, I can do it with the white slider, which is going to bring in detail in the really bright areas. Now I can do the same for the dark areas as well, so I don't see a lot of detail in the ceiling, and I can fix that by moving the shadow slider to the bright areas. And if you notice the histogram, only the dark parts of the histogram are getting affected. And if you see, I have gotten back some of the detail in this area. So in this way, you can selectively affect some parts of your photograph and not your entire photograph with the help of these four sliders. But if you want to affect the entire photograph, if you want to make your entire photograph brighter or your entire photograph darker, you can do that with the exposure slider. And our goal over here is to have a photograph which has detail in all of its areas and a histogram that does not have any clipping happening. And the clipping is indicated by these triangles. If these triangles are white or any other color than black, that means you're in trouble. You need to bring back some of the detail. So that was all there was about exposure, and I'll see you in the next step.